Ethan Brooks sat in his grand office, overlooking the city skyline, a view that was worth millions, yet he felt nothing. It was just another day in his empire of success, a success that felt as hollow as the echo of his footsteps in his massive, empty mansion. With all his achievements, he felt a gnawing emptiness. One day, while visiting a small, cozy cafe to escape the overwhelming grandeur of his usual lifestyle, he noticed a young woman working behind the counter. She was plain, dressed in worn jeans and an apron smeared with coffee stains, but her smile was radiant, lighting up the space in a way he hadn't felt in years. Watching her interact with customers, Ethan was mesmerized by her energy, her kindness, and the way she seemed genuinely happy despite her modest life. Curiosity compelled him to return to the cafe day after day, just to see her again. He learned her name was Grace, and eventually he worked up the courage to speak to her. Grace was polite but distant, wary of his attention, assuming he was just another entitled rich man. However, Ethan was undeterred. For the first time in years, he felt alive, like his heart was beating for a purpose beyond wealth. As he began to slowly break down her walls, Ethan discovered Grace's life was anything but easy. She worked multiple jobs, supporting her family while putting her dreams aside. For Ethan, who had always thrown money at any problem he faced, her sacrifices and resilience were both inspiring and humbling. Grace didn't care about his money or status, something he'd never encountered before. But as he continued to pursue her, whispers about his intentions began to spread. His business partners, friends, and even his family started questioning his interest in a nobody. Unfazed, Ethan continued to court her, intent on proving that his feelings were genuine. Days turned into weeks as Ethan found any excuse to visit the cafe, gradually earning Grace's trust. Initially, their conversations were light, mostly about books or local events. But as the walls between them began to crumble, he glimpsed the depth of her world, a world starkly different from his own. Grace shared stories of her family, the struggles they faced, and the dreams she'd put on hold to care for her younger siblings after their parents had passed. Ethan was struck by her resilience, a stark contrast to the people he knew, who would rather whine over minor inconveniences than face real challenges. To Grace, happiness wasn't a luxury she could buy. It was something she created out of the little things in life. Ethan, who had everything, envied her for it. One rainy evening, Ethan offered to drive her home. Grace hesitated, wary of being seen with him, but the downpour convinced her. The drive was quiet, but comfortable, with the sound of raindrops setting an almost cinematic mood. For the first time, Grace opened up about her dreams. She spoke of wanting to be a teacher, to make a difference in kids' lives, but how the demands of her life had forced her to put those aspirations aside. As she spoke, her voice was filled with longing Ethan had rarely seen. In the dim light, with the city's lights blurred by the rain, Ethan made a promise to himself. He would do whatever it took to see her dreams come true. But he knew that, for now, revealing his true feelings could only backfire. Grace valued independence and despised handouts. If he truly wanted her in his life, he would have to play this differently. He had to make her fall in love with him, not his wealth. Meanwhile, word about their friendship started to spread. At business dinners, he caught whispers about the coffee shop girl. Rumors circulated, with many assuming she was just another passing fancy. His business partners warned him about distractions, and his family wasn't thrilled about the idea of him associating with someone beneath his social status. But Ethan found he couldn't care less. For the first time, his life felt meaningful, and he wasn't going to let anyone ruin that. But the challenge of winning Grace's trust and affection would be far greater than he anticipated. Grace's past relationships had taught her that people often saw her as dispensable, and she was determined to protect her heart from being broken again. She didn't believe Ethan's intentions were genuine. In her world, men like him didn't fall for women like her. In the weeks that followed, their interactions became a delicate dance, Ethan trying to prove his sincerity without overwhelming her, and Grace testing his resolve. But he was patient, waiting for small moments, a lingering smile, a laugh, a fleeting touch. And bit by bit, Grace began to let him in. Just as Ethan felt he was close to breaking through, a scandal hit his business. an embezzlement case involving a trusted associate, forcing him to drop everything to control the damage. He disappeared from Grace's life for weeks, leaving her to wonder if he was just another rich man with fleeting interest. Ethan had no idea that this silence, necessary as it was, would be a painful test of Grace's budding trust in him. The silence stretched longer than Grace expected, leaving her feeling strangely hollow. Part of her scolded herself for even caring. After all, Ethan was a millionaire, a man used to getting whatever he wanted. She reminded herself that men like him didn't have room in their lives for people like her. But another part of her, a part she'd been trying to ignore, felt disappointed. Finally, weeks later, Ethan returned. He walked into the cafe one chilly morning, looking exhausted but resolute. When their eyes met, there was a vulnerability in his gaze she hadn't seen before. Without saying much, he asked if they could go for a walk after her shift. Grace agreed, though she kept her guard up, unsure if she should trust him again. As they walked through the city, Ethan opened up about the scandal that had shaken his business. He admitted he couldn't share the details, but he described the betrayal he felt from people he had trusted for years. Grace listened, her heart softening as she saw the toll it had taken on him. For the first time, she glimpsed the burden that came with his success and realized that wealth and power didn't shield him from pain. They found themselves at a quiet park, the city lights casting a gentle glow around them. Ethan turned to her, his expression raw. "I don't want you to think I disappeared because I lost interest," he said. "These past few weeks have been hell, but through it all, I couldn't stop thinking about you. I was worried you'd think. I don't know, that you'd think I just walked away." Grace was silent, emotions swirling inside her. She wanted to believe him, but her past held her back. The men she'd known before had often promised things they couldn't deliver, leaving her to pick up the pieces. But there was something in Ethan's eyes, a sincerity that was hard to ignore. Against her better judgment, she reached out and took his hand. "I won't pretend it didn't hurt," she admitted. "But I know what it's like to feel betrayed. I know what it's like to have people you trust turn their backs on you." They stood there, hand in hand, two people from different worlds connected by the shared scars of betrayal and loss. That night, they became more than friends. Grace realized that maybe, just maybe, she could trust Ethan. And Ethan realized he had found someone who understood him in a way no one else had. But as their bond deepened, forces beyond their control began to conspire against them. Unbeknownst to Ethan, his family and business associates were plotting ways to end his relationship with Grace. They saw her as a threat, a distraction, and they weren't about to let her get in the way of their carefully laid plans for his future. One of his closest advisors, a man he had considered a friend, secretly started gathering information about Grace's background, hoping to use it to push her out of Ethan's life. One evening, Ethan received an anonymous email with photos of Grace talking to an old friend, a man from her past whom she'd helped through a rough patch. The email hinted at an affair, claiming Grace was manipulating Ethan while seeing someone else. Furious and hurt, Ethan confronted her, his jealousy fueled by the painful memories of betrayal still fresh in his mind. Grace, taken aback, tried to explain, but the damage had been done. Ethan walked away, leaving Grace heartbroken and confused. Alone, Ethan realized he'd been played, manipulated by the people around him. He knew he had to make things right with Grace, but he feared it might already be too late. After days of silence, Ethan felt like he was on the edge of a cliff. He couldn't shake the regret gnawing at him. The memory of Grace's hurt expression haunted him, and he realized he had let his insecurities and the whispers of others cloud his judgment. His world, which had once seemed so orderly and secure, felt as if it were unraveling. Finally, he couldn't take it any longer. He decided to confront his closest advisor, Leonard, the man who had fueled his doubts about Grace. Ethan arranged a private meeting, where he asked directly about the anonymous email and accusations. Leonard's demeanor shifted, and Ethan detected a flash of guilt in his eyes. After pressing him, Leonard admitted to orchestrating the entire scheme to protect Ethan from what he saw as a destructive relationship. "You're meant to be with someone who fits your lifestyle, not her," Leonard sneered. Furious, Ethan realized that the people he had trusted the most were manipulating him for their own selfish reasons. With newfound clarity, Ethan cut ties with Leonard and decided to make amends with Grace. But winning back her trust would prove harder than he anticipated. That evening, he arrived at the cafe, only to learn that Grace had quit her job and moved back to her hometown to be with her family. The weight of his mistake hit him harder than he expected, and he felt the urgency to find her. Without hesitation, he cleared his schedule, packed a bag, and drove through the night to reach her. The next morning, exhausted but determined, Ethan arrived at the small town where Grace had grown up. He found her family home, a modest house with a tidy garden and a warm, inviting feel, so different from the sterile luxury of his world. Gathering his courage, he knocked on the door. Grace's younger sister answered, and after recognizing him, hesitated before inviting him inside. She led him to the backyard, where Grace was sitting on a small wooden swing, lost in thought. When she looked up and saw him, her expression was a mix of surprise and guarded emotion. "I don't want your pity, Ethan," she said before he could speak. "You made it clear what you thought of me. I'm not some project you can fix or save." Her words stung, but he knew he deserved them. "Grace, please just hear me out," he began, his voice trembling. "I was a fool. I let my insecurities and the people around me cloud my judgment. I was scared of losing you, scared of being hurt. I came here because I need you to know that I love you." She looked away, her expression unreadable. "You think an apology can erase everything? I trusted you, Ethan, and you threw that trust away the moment things got tough. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," he said softly. "But I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove that I'm willing to fight for us." For a moment, silence hung between them, thick and tense. Finally, Grace stood up, looking him in the eye. "If you want to prove it, then show me. Words mean nothing to me anymore. You'll have to do more than just apologize." With a glimmer of hope, Ethan returned to the city, determined to win back Grace's trust through actions, not words. He began distancing himself from people like Leonard, restructuring his life to be one she could share without losing herself. Over the next few weeks, he volunteered at organizations she cared about, learned about the struggles she faced, and found ways to support her dreams without overwhelming her. Through letters and small gestures, he reached out to her, expressing his regret and his newfound commitment. Bit by bit, Grace began to see his sincerity, but she was cautious, knowing the stakes were high. Just when it seemed they might be on the path to reconciliation, another obstacle emerged. Someone from Ethan's past, a former lover who harbored resentment and jealousy, decided to make her move, manipulating events to draw Ethan back into his old world, trying to drive a wedge between him and Grace once again. Just as Ethan was beginning to make progress with Grace, an old lover, Victoria, appeared out of nowhere. Victoria was a striking figure from Ethan's past, a woman of sophistication, wealth, and ambition. They'd once been entangled in a high-society relationship that was more about status and power than love. Seeing him with someone like Grace, Victoria felt a surge of jealousy and decided that Ethan, and all the influence that came with him, should still be hers. One evening, while Ethan was finalizing a charity event he'd been planning in Grace's honor, Victoria showed up at his office unannounced. She leaned against his desk with a familiar, confident smile and looked him up and down with the same calculating gaze he remembered. "Ethan, darling, it's been too long," she purred. Caught off guard, Ethan felt an old pang of recognition but immediately reminded himself of the man he was striving to become. He politely told her he was busy, hoping she'd leave. But Victoria wasn't so easily deterred. She began to reminisce about their past, slyly weaving in stories of their wild nights, their mutual friends, and the luxuries they'd shared. She made subtle digs about Grace, hinting that Ethan deserved someone more befitting his stature. When Victoria touched his arm, her voice dripping with suggestion, Ethan pulled back. "That's all behind me now, Victoria," he said firmly. "I'm building something real, something meaningful." But Victoria wasn't one to be dismissed. She launched into a campaign to regain Ethan's attention. She began attending the same events as him, showing up at his office under various pretenses, even spreading rumors that they were rekindling their romance. She knew how to create a scene, planting seeds of doubt in the minds of those around him, hoping they'd trickle back to Grace. As whispers about Ethan and Victoria started to circulate, Grace began receiving messages and anonymous tips. Photos of Victoria and Ethan together at events, gossip about their past, and even claims that Ethan was still seeing her in secret flooded her inbox. At first, Grace brushed it off, trusting in the progress they had made. But as the rumors grew, doubts began to seep in. Finally, unable to ignore the situation any longer, Grace confronted Ethan one evening when he came to visit her family's home. "So, is this why you've been working so late?" she asked, her voice trembling as she held up her phone with a picture of him and Victoria together. Ethan's heart sank as he realized the extent of Victoria's manipulation. "Grace, this is exactly what she wants. Victoria's trying to come between us. She knows I don't feel anything for her." Grace looked away, struggling to hold back tears. "It's hard to believe you when she's showing up everywhere you go, acting like she belongs by your side. I can't compete with someone who knows your world so well." Ethan took her hands, desperate to make her understand. "Grace, I don't want that world anymore. I'm trying to build a future with you. Please trust me. Don't let her win." But Victoria's tactics only grew bolder. She began to fabricate stories, feeding lies to the press and even appearing on a popular talk show where she hinted at a rekindled romance with Ethan. The headlines were brutal, painting Grace as the other woman who could never belong in his life. The final blow came when Victoria leaked a private photo of her and Ethan from years ago, framing it as a recent encounter. When Grace saw the image, her resolve broke. She couldn't bear the thought of being dragged through the mud in Ethan's world, nor could she face the constant reminder that she was an outsider. In a moment of heartbreak, she left him a note and disappeared, asking him not to contact her. Ethan was shattered, but he wasn't willing to let Victoria ruin his future. With a fierce determination, he vowed to clear Grace's name, expose Victoria's lies, and win Grace back once and for all, even if it meant destroying everything he'd built in the process. Ethan couldn't let Grace walk away, not when he knew she was the only person who had ever seen the real him. With his world unraveling around him, he set his sights on exposing Victoria and proving his loyalty to Grace, no matter the cost. The first step was to gather evidence against Victoria. Ethan enlisted the help of his tech-savvy friend, Marcus, who began digging into Victoria's recent activities. They uncovered a string of payments and communications that hinted at a conspiracy. Victoria had been paying tabloids, bribing event organizers to get close to Ethan, and even hiring photographers to capture them together. She was orchestrating everything. But it wasn't enough for Ethan to have proof. He needed to make it public. He called in every favor he had, gathering influential people and press for a surprise announcement. He arranged a press conference in his office, inviting major media outlets, his business partners, and friends, everyone who had witnessed the rumors firsthand. The day of the conference, Victoria appeared, confident and smiling, assuming he was about to confirm their relationship. But when she saw Marcus beside him, her smile wavered. Ethan took the podium and, without hesitation, exposed the entire scheme. He laid out every piece of evidence, from the photos she staged to the lies she spread, revealing Victoria as the architect of the cruel campaign against him and Grace. The room erupted. Victoria was publicly disgraced, her reputation in tatters. The press swarmed her, asking why she'd stooped to such lows, but she had no answers. She fled the scene, and Ethan knew he'd taken his first step in rebuilding trust with Grace. But even with Victoria out of the picture, Grace was still gone. She had retreated to a remote cabin, seeking solace from the emotional turmoil of the past few months. Uncertain of her feelings and overwhelmed by the media's relentless coverage, she avoided her phone, needing time to think. Desperate, Ethan tracked her down, arriving at the cabin on a rainy evening. He found her standing on the porch, her face etched with surprise and hesitation. Before she could say anything, he held out a folder, proof of Victoria's deceit, along with letters he'd written, documenting his feelings and regrets during their time apart. "Grace," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I know I've hurt you, and I know words might not be enough. But I'm here to show you everything, to give you the truth, no matter how long it takes." She took the folder, her hands trembling as she flipped through the pages. She read his words, saw the evidence of Victoria's manipulations, and felt the weight of his commitment. But the pain of his earlier betrayal still lingered. "I don't know if I can just forgive and forget, Ethan," she whispered. "I don't want to be a weakness people can exploit in your life." "You're not a weakness," he insisted, his gaze unwavering. "You're my strength. I lost sight of that because I was too scared of losing you. I don't care what it costs me, I want a life with you." For the first time, Grace let herself consider the possibility. She looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, and felt a glimmer of hope. But she couldn't just go back to how things were. "If we do this, Ethan, we do it on my terms. I need to see that you've changed, not just for me, but for yourself." Ethan nodded, understanding her need for proof of his growth. "I'll do whatever it takes." They returned to the city together, but this time, they took things slowly, working to rebuild their relationship one step at a time. Ethan made it a point to reshape his life, becoming more involved in causes that mattered to Grace and stepping back from the high society life that had once consumed him. Just as they began to rebuild, however, they faced an unexpected threat, a corporate takeover orchestrated by rivals who saw Ethan's recent vulnerability as an opportunity. If Ethan didn't act fast, he could lose everything, and for the first time, he was forced to decide between the empire he'd built and the future he wanted with Grace. With her support, Ethan made a bold decision, choosing love and integrity over the cutthroat world he'd once thrived in. Together, they fought back, confronting the betrayal within his business while strengthening their bond. Their relationship was tested, but this time, they faced it side by side, emerging stronger. Ethan and Grace were slowly finding their way back to each other, but the challenges kept coming. As Ethan restructured his life, prioritizing integrity and purpose over wealth, his competitors saw it as the perfect time to strike. His recent public scandal with Victoria had left his reputation vulnerable, and now they were attempting a hostile takeover of his company. Rumors swirled, and the board members who once stood firmly by Ethan's side began to waver. Some saw him as weak, softened by his personal struggles, and questioned his leadership. This was exactly what his competitors were banking on, to dismantle Ethan's empire while he was focused on proving himself to Grace. They wanted to make him choose between love and business, believing he couldn't handle both. But this time, Ethan wasn't alone. Grace, who had been hesitant to fully re-enter his world, now stood beside him, refusing to let him lose everything he'd built. "You don't have to do this alone," she told him one evening. "If we're going to have a future together, I want to be part of all of it, the good and the bad." Her support reignited a fire in Ethan. They spent countless nights strategizing together, with Grace offering fresh perspectives on his business, ideas he'd never considered. Her resilience and strength became his source of inspiration, reminding him of why he'd fallen in love with her in the first place. As they fought to regain control, Ethan discovered that a former colleague, someone he'd mentored and trusted, had been feeding information to his rivals. Betrayal once again stung, but he knew he had to stay focused. Together, he and Grace devised a plan. They would counter the hostile takeover with a complete rebranding of the company, centered on ethics and social responsibility. It was a bold move, one that put them at risk of losing investors, but it also presented a unique opportunity to redefine everything Ethan stood for. To execute this plan, Ethan held an emergency press conference, inviting journalists, stakeholders, and the public. Standing on the stage with Grace by his side, he shared the vision for his company's future, one that prioritized honesty, community, and long-term sustainability over short-term gains. He publicly acknowledged his past mistakes, the personal challenges he'd faced, and his commitment to becoming a better leader and person. The response was overwhelming. Though some investors pulled out, others stepped forward, inspired by his transparency and determination. The public, moved by his story and the visible support from Grace, rallied behind him. Slowly, the tide began to turn, and his rivals saw their takeover slipping through their fingers. But the final test came in the form of a devastating legal battle. The rivals, furious at Ethan's success in thwarting their plans, filed a lawsuit, accusing him of misconduct in an attempt to ruin his reputation. It was a brutal fight, one that drained him both financially and emotionally. Grace, unwavering, stood by his side through every sleepless night and every grueling court session. In the end, after months of relentless struggle, they emerged victorious. The judge ruled in Ethan's favor, clearing his name and solidifying his reputation as a transformed man, a leader with integrity and a clear purpose. The victory was bittersweet, as it marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Ethan had lost some of his fortune, but he had gained something far more valuable: a life filled with purpose, love, and the unwavering support of a woman who believed in him even when he doubted himself. With their lives finally free of the shadows of doubt and betrayal, Ethan and Grace married in an intimate ceremony, surrounded by a close circle of friends and family who had supported them through their journey. As they exchanged vows, they knew their love had been tested by fire and had emerged stronger, built on trust, respect, and shared dreams. The media covered their wedding with headlines of a fairy tale romance, but Ethan and Grace knew the truth. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every battle, every tear, and every sacrifice. Ethan and Grace's wedding marked the start of a life they had both fought so hard to build. Their love had withstood betrayal, jealousy, and power struggles, and now, standing together as husband and wife, they were ready to embark on a new journey, a life of meaning, driven by shared dreams and mutual respect. After the wedding, Ethan decided to step back from the corporate world for a while. He and Grace embarked on a world tour, immersing themselves in cultures, volunteering in underserved communities, and supporting causes they both felt passionate about. Ethan realized he had spent most of his life chasing success, but with Grace by his side, he found a joy in simplicity he never knew he needed. The time away transformed Ethan even further. He returned with a renewed purpose, ready to relaunch his company as an entity driven not just by profit, but by a mission to make a positive impact. With Grace as his partner, they worked tirelessly to implement social and environmental initiatives that improved lives and reshaped the company's image. The public, who had followed their story for years, was captivated by their journey, seeing in them a rare example of love, resilience, and the courage to change. One day, as they were reviewing plans for a new community initiative, Grace received a call from a woman she'd met years ago while working at the cafe. The woman was struggling to make ends meet, trying to support her children while working multiple jobs. Grace knew that life all too well, and without hesitation, she invited the woman to join their company's new social outreach team, a program designed to provide jobs and support for people in challenging circumstances. For Grace, this was more than just helping someone. It was a way of giving back to the community that had shaped her, and it reminded Ethan of why he loved her in the first place. Their lives became a testament to what could be achieved when love and purpose aligned. Together, they inspired countless others, showing that wealth and power didn't have to come at the expense of kindness and integrity. And with every project, every life they touched, Ethan felt the void inside him slowly filling, a void that no amount of money had ever been able to satisfy. Years later, as they celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary, Ethan reflected on the journey that had brought them here. They had both changed in ways they hadn't anticipated, growing together and finding strength in their partnership. Their story had become a legend, a tale of a millionaire who had once been empty, finding love in the most unexpected place, and learning that true wealth came not from money, but from the people who stood by him, through thick and thin. In the end, Ethan and Grace's life together wasn't the fairy tale the world saw. It was something far better. It was real, grounded in sacrifice, forgiveness, and the belief that love could overcome any challenge. As they raised their glasses to each other, surrounded by friends, family, and a life's work dedicated to helping others, they knew they had built something enduring, something that could withstand anything the world threw their way. They had found their happily ever after, not in riches, but in each other, and in a love that would inspire generations to come. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. Your interest and support inspire us to bring you more captivating tales filled with emotions, twists, and the complexity of life, love, betrayal, and redemption. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a comment and share your thoughts. We value your voice and want to hear what you feel. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a new story, and hit the notification bell to stay updated. Thank you for bringing this channel to life with your views and encouragement. See you in the next story.